Hi people, Murinura Isenberg here again. Yeah, this video is going to be about several things pretty much, but it's going to generally speaking be about the aspects of creation and whatnot in the reference to the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and to a lesser extent the Tree of Death. Long story short, I'm just going to dive right in or jump right in, whatever. Everything in this world, something that some occultists even and the let alone the average person is aware of. Sorry, everything in this world, every aspect of creation, everything is ruled by an angel. Okay, put in charge by God, if you will, so to speak. Not so to speak, sorry, literally as well as figuratively. That's what I mean. Everything in this world is ruled by a higher being, a celestial being, so an angel. Okay, and in its most basic form, or from the most basic perspective, in terms of a main example is the tree of life. But even its sub branches of every sephira, so every sphere on the tree of life, is down to the most mundanest of things, is ruled by an angel, is ruled by, I'm sorry, I need to pick something up, sorry. Yeah, it's ruled by an angel, it's ruled by a celestial being. Everything in this world is ruled by an angel. Okay, believe me that when I say that even fecal matter is, so poo, bluntly put, shit. Think of the most useless, most insignificant thing that you might come across, vermin, whatever you wanna do or say or do. It's ruled by an angel, it's ruled by a celestial being. Okay, your name, regardless of who you are, you name it, your religion, everything. Every action in the world is dictated by an angel. That's more or less, and in its turn, the hierarchy goes all the way up to God, and it's overly complex to the point where the average person will never even come close to being able to understand it. But from the most basic of perspectives, or the most main of perspectives, you've got the tree of life. That's just something to keep in mind. Okay. So honestly, in a certain way, this video is a tree of life video, or a Kabbalah. It's a layman video. Okay, to the Kabbalah. So basically, the layman's version or a layman explanation to the Kabbalah and its perspective trees, the tree of life and the tree of death. But I'm not gonna discuss the tree of death so much as I will life. Point is that the tree of life, most of you that are familiar with it know the spheres. It starts at Keter, you've got Bina, you've got Shokma, you've got Tiferet, Hot, Yesod, you've got Gebura, you've got Chesed, you've got Netzach, and Malkut, and it just goes on and on and on. In short, these are all aspects of creation represented by planets. Keter, the highest one, is represented by Neptune, with Metatron as the traditional ruler. Bina is represented by Saturn, with the archangel Zapkil. They're all archangels, all ruled by archangels. Zapkil with a P, okay. So Tzapkiel, or Qiel, so Tzapkil. That's the name of the archangel ruling Bina or Saturn. He goes also by several other names, but I'm not going to get into that. That's the conventional name that he's known by. I'm sorry. Before I just wanted to reiterate. Okay, I made a short mistake there. Uranus represents Keter. Okay, Shokma is represented by Neptune. I repeat, Uranus, which is ruled by Metatron conventionally, is known as the sphere of Keter, or better said, Keter is represented by Uranus conventionally and or traditionally. Shokma is represented by Neptune and is ruled by the Archangel Raziel, one of my main guys, if you will, one of my main men. Hot is ruled Mercury. Hot is represented by Mercury, and that's ruled by Michael. Netzach is ruled by Anael or Haniel. It's represented by Venus. Yesod is represented by the moon and is ruled by Gabriel. Malkut is ruled by my beloved Vice Lord and Vice Patron Sandalphon, and it's a reference to the earth. It's represented by the earth itself, okay, in a Kabbalistic context. And it just goes on. For the rest, Cheset, represented by Jupiter, and that's ruled by Zadkiel, the Archangel Zadkiel, Zadkiel, the Archangel ruling Jupiter. And if I haven't missed anything, last but not least, saving the best for last is my beloved Lord Samael, which rules Gebura, specifically, which is the one which is represented by Mars. There's only one Gebura, so to speak. Okay, Mars represents Gebura, and let me see. I don't think I missed anything. Tiferet, the sun, which is represented by Raphael. Please forgive me if I missed one or two spheres. These are just examples that I'm giving. Okay, this is just off the top of my head. Point is that everything, in a layman sense, the tree of life within the Kabbalah simply reflects and or represents aspects of life, aspects of existence. Okay, so God created the world, and God says, okay, the world is going to consist in a human context as well as a universal context based upon these foundations, as in specific things. For example, Gebura, which is represented by Mars. I'm going to be, from henceforth, I'm going to be referring to the Sephirot, so the aspects of creation based on their planet. So Mars represents severity, it represents all the violent things in the world, strenuousness along with courage and whatnot. Venus represents love, compassion, as well as an absence thereof, and it just goes on. Okay, the sun represents overall wisdom, etc., etc., etc. These are the foundations upon which the world is built. Okay, at the very least, limiting to a human context, but it goes beyond that. In general, it goes, it's universal in its context, and you name it. Keter simply is the sphere closest to God, if you will. That's also why it's represented by Metatron. Basically, every change that God wills for, as in, hey, my will be done, boop, it, in a Kabbalistic context, it goes through all the spheres of creation, or it goes to its perspective sphere of creation before it manifests in the physical world. So it goes all the way from Uranus' sphere, so Keter, from there all the way to, so from Metatron's sphere all the way to Sandalphon's sphere, the earth itself. And that's how it manifests. That's where the notion of mental, astral, physical comes from. Yeah, what else can I mention? For those of you that are unaware of it, mental, astral, physical simply refers to the way that something manifests materially. Okay, as in the thought is willed by God Himself, the same way that everything else is willed by God. So the mental aspect, that's where it comes from. The highest aspect. Astral is simply the spiritual process of converting that mental concept into something astral, so something spiritual, something ethereal. And then the ethereal sees to it that things are manifested into the physical world. That's also why the Bible says it is from the immaterial that the material has sprouted forth. Everything in the world that you see materially has come from the immaterial, and that's where it comes from. The most simplest of things, such as the invention of the wheel, we're talking about mundane crap that you use on a day-to-day thingy. The most insignificant of things, or seemingly insignificant of things, from a TV remote to a computer to a cell phone, everything that you use, okay? The idea came from somewhere to create it. Every aspect, the idea to refine it to the point where you use your iPhone nowadays. Okay, the concept of creating an iPhone, an electronic cell phone of such a nature, such as the iPhone, comes from the mental first. Okay, and then it came from and then it made its way through the astral. It's processed or pre-processed or converted, whatever you want to use, whichever phrase you want to use. It jumps in any case from mental to astral, and then from astral to physical. In this context, for example, Steve Jobs is the one that invented the iPhone, as far as I know. Yeah, Steve Jobs invented the iPhone, right? Someone please correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong. Bottom line is that everything destiny. It was also destiny that Steve Jobs was going to invent the iPhone. All of that stuff is already pre-planned. That's the whole mental part, as in before Steve Jobs was even born, God pretty much said, okay, this guy's going to be born, he's going to invent the iPhone at such an age, blah, 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 blah. For the rest, everyone else takes care of it. All of God's subjects take care of it. The angels, they do everything. As in, okay, this needs to happen, he's going to invent the iPhone. That whole process is the mental part, okay? As in, he's going to create it. So that whole process to the point where he reaches that age. Then the astral takes place in between to that point that I just mentioned and the point that he actually develops the iPhone. The idea comes forth, and the idea is also God's will, just like everything else. Okay, that is the astral aspect. As in, Steve Jobs gets a eureka, the whole metaphorical light bulb above his head. As in, hey, the thought comes to him to create something. Thoughts aren't material. Thoughts have no matter, as in thoughts are not physical or of a material nature. Okay, they're not tangible. Thoughts are intangible. So it's created and boom. Okay, Steve Jobs just says, I have a great idea. Can't quite put my finger on it. His intent is clear, as in, hey, I want to create something like this. And, he works his way through, okay, to the point where he has the general framework or layout plan for creating a phone, which we nowadays know as the iPhone. That's the whole astral aspect. And then he actually converts it into, it's another process from astral to physical. Making up the blueprints, the designers, everything, talking to his engineers, as in, hey, listen, make this cell phone, blah, 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 blah. It needs to have these features, etc., etc. That is the jump from astral to physical, and it's gradual, as you can tell. In some cases, when something comes into existence, it can be, depending on the nature of the object or item, it can just happen in one fell swoop, or it can happen gradually. Usually with things that are considered by human beings at least as greater or having more value. These things usually, okay, as is noticed by people, it happens gradually. Okay, but even things that are insignificant, such as a leaf falling from a tree, can also be gradual depending on the process. It all depends on the object primarily itself. But that is how pretty much the whole concept of things coming into existence exists, and that's where the tree of life and the Kabbalah comes into play, and the fact that everything is ruled by a celestial being appointed by God. The same way that the archangels that rule over their respective spheres, Samael rules Mars, Michael rules Mercury, Raphael rules the Sun, etc., 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 etc. Sandalphon rules the Earth. They've all been assigned their stations by God, and only through God's will they actually change their stations. Nothing is going to change. And since I'm on the subject of the Tree of Life, I also need to point out the fact that the Tree of Life, a lot of people state that the Tree of Life, some of the Sephira, they oppose each other, which is true, but it all depends on the context, okay? If you take a look at an image of the Tree of Life, you'll see for yourself that once you've grasped the concept of it in an advanced way, the way I have, this is 101. This is the most basic of things for me. Something that I already know, but only now I'm thinking about recording this video. I've already discussed this in other videos, but not exactly the way I'm discussing it right now. This is simply this concept taken from a different angle, more of a layman's angle, if you will. Because the last time I discussed the Tree of Life was a really long time ago, was years ago. In any case, you would think traditionally that, hey, listen, Mars opposes Venus, etc., etc., etc. For example, Saturn opposes the Sun. It just goes on and on and on and on. No, you would think that, but no. Okay, Mars does oppose Venus, but not in the way that you think. Okay, within a Kabbalistic context, definitely within the context of the Kabbalah, it does not. In some cases it can be true, but not overall. Not that this really matters. This is just theoretically speaking, since we're on the subject. Mars opposes Jupiter within a Kabbalistic context. Jupiter usually stands for mercy. The traditional phrase, the key phrase or key word to remember, Kabbalistically speaking, with Jupiter is mercy. Okay, Jupiter stands for abundance, etc., etc., etc. Mars stands for more for severity, whereas Jupiter stands for sympathy, and Mars stands for the exact opposite. Mars stands for reprimanding and strife and um, and simply punishment overall. Within a Kabbalistic context, that's the case. Uh, but again, like I said, it all depends. It's anything but black and white. There are so many shades of gray that it's seemingly infinite. But yeah, they're based on that alone. You can see how complex God's design of the universe is. Okay, we're talking about infinitely complex, way above your level as a human being. You'll never be able to understand any of this to its fullest extent. You can try, but like I said in an earlier video, it's like an ant trying to understand a human being. It's not gonna happen. Okay, that's the whole definition of omnipotence. That's why God is almighty. He's omnipotent. Um, because from a certain angle, you could also say that Saturn opposes Jupiter, for example, within a Kabbalistic context, and Saturn deals with restriction. Saturn deals with, but within a Kabbalistic context, Saturn also deals with a certain degree of enlightenment and whatnot, and Jupiter deals with abundance, and it just goes on and on and on. It all depends, totally depends on the angle from which you're looking at things. Because, for example, in an astrological context, Mars does oppose Venus, Jupiter does oppose Saturn, and it just goes on. Since within those contexts, Venus stands more for passiveness and gentility, whereas Mars stands for rawness and doing things by force or coercively, and Saturn stands for restriction and gloominess, and Jupiter stands for optimism and abundance and whatnot. You can see the polar opposites, but that's in an astrological context. In a Kabbalistic context, it's completely different. Okay, it is very complicated, but I simply thought to shed light on this subject since I'm talking about it. In any case, that bit that I just explained was a bit more for people that are already occultists. But again, referring back to what I said before that, from a layman's perspective, that is pretty much how the universe works, okay? And specifically relating to the Kabbalah. So people that wanted to know what the Kabbalah is about in the most simplistic of ways, I've already given you that. That's simply how everything works. So everything in this world is ruled by a divine being appointed by God, an angel appointed by God. And those angels have subservient spirits, and it just goes on. It's a very complicated hierarchy. And everything in this world falls under an aspect of creation within the Kabbalah. Everything in this world, down to the most simplest of things. It all depends. It all depends. For example, everything relating to war and bloodshed is Mars, more or less. So Gebura, everything. We're talking about war, everything from the most massivest of world wars down to the smallest of fights, of violent fights that people engage in with the streets, enemies amongst each other. Everything like that. Something as simple as cutting your finger during an accident is an aspect, falls under the aspect of creation known as Gebura. It just goes on. The same thing, the same way that love, generally speaking, would fall under Venus. Okay, as in love from any context, friendship, romantic affiliations, anything that can be construed as love, even something as simple as loving a flower, any kind of affection, okay, is either Venus or Jupiter. All depends. If the love is more out of sympathy, or if it's just plain up sympathy, straight up sympathy or plain sympathy, then it's Jupiter. Okay, it's Chesit instead of Nitsa. And it just goes on and on and on. That's my point. And things of a material nature in general, the closest you'll come to, okay, in a Kabbalistic context, as far as I know, based on my own knowledge and experience, is Sandalphon sphere, Malkut. Stands for all things of a material nature primarily, and just a reference to the earth, as in all the four elements, even the fifth element from a Kabbalistic context, everything relating to that. The material as a whole is Kabbalistically speaking falls under Malkut. So the earth, the sphere aligning with the earth. It just goes on and on and on. I could discuss all of it, but these are just examples that I've given you. The highest sphere, for example, the one that Uranus represents with Metatron as ruler, simply stands for the highest. That's also why Uranus is conventionally appointed as as the representative planet or celestial body of that aspect of creation, because Uranus has a lot in common, or Uranus comes closest to it, because Uranus in general also stands for genius, as in, let's just say Uranus is the planet that corresponds the most with the creator aspect, as in creating things. That's usually why people that are born under a strong Uranus, people that were born under Uranus in Aquarius, for example, Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. These people are outright geniuses. If someone has a well aspected Uranus, Uranus is in Aquarius, Uranus has a bunch of good aspects, you name it. Uranus is exalted, really great looking, great Uranus. Then that person will honestly that person will have genius levels of Shakespearean or Darwin like levels of genius. This is just so to speak. My point is that, yeah, the creator aspect is what aligns the most with Uranus, and that's where Uranus comes into play. That's why Uranus is assigned, as the planet that corresponds the most with Keter, because that's where it all comes from. Okay, the closest that you'll get to God in the Kabbalah is Keter, that sphere. That's also why Metatron can also help you with all of these things. It's his strongest trait. If you haven't seen my video on Metatron already, just look in the description of in the description below for the link to it, or I'm sorry for my dogs in the background, or the end screen. Metatron is exceptionally skilled. That's one of his specialties in helping you invent things, you name it. Helping you invent things, helping you to develop new things, getting ideas and inspiration out of nowhere. So, practical applications, for example, if you want to work with the spirit and you want to do something like invent something groundbreaking, you want to do something, Metatron is one, at the very least, one of the best guys, arguably the best guy you can go to, the best spirit that you can go to for sheer enlightenment. If you want enlightenment, you literally want to be as close to God as you possibly can, literally, figuratively, in every sense of the word. Again, Metatron is one of the guys to go to. Metatron is one of the metaphorically speaking strongest celestial spirits out there. He's one of the strongest angels out there. Not literally, of course. This is just so to speak, because it's not about strength. Every celestial spirit, so every archangel, every angel that rules has his or her place, or has its place in the world, and it's unfair to it's impractical and unfair and unjust to compare things based on power, because it doesn't work that way. Okay, each of them has their strong suits and adversely their weaknesses, but only from a human perspective, not weaknesses in reality. Bottom line is, practically speaking, yeah, Metatron is definitely one of the most notable celestial spirits, one of the most notable archangels. That also something that immediately drew my attention back in the days when I still researched Metatron. The potential that I saw from a neutral perspective in working with them is tremendous. I can only imagine someone that works with Metatron the right way. So the way that, not to toot my own horn, but I don't care who thinks I'm arrogant or whatever. Like I've said it 1,000 times in the past. Someone that, really can work the way I do, as in maximizing results. With Metatron, man, you're going to accomplish things, and you're going to achieve tremendous levels of divinity and spirituality if you do things right and you work with Metatron in the long term seriously. The reason I don't do so is because simply from, it simply has to do with my personality. My beloved patrons and all the other spirits I work with, they provide me with everything I want and need, including enlightenment and spirituality and whatnot. in a different way, in a more down to earth way, but nevertheless, they provide me with everything overall. They were the best choices based on my own life and my own existence. So yeah, it's simply a matter of to each his own. Bottom line is that's it. That was it basically for the Kabbalah explained, um, and the fact that angels rule over everything as appointed by God, every aspect of creation, everything in existence, more or less, and all the other stuff I mentioned in this video. Last but not least, oh yeah, I'm going to mention briefly, like I said, the tree of death as well, which is that as you already know, everything in this world has a polar opposite, more or less. Plus has minus, plus has minus, um, black has white. It just goes on and on and on. It's the whole concept of yin and yang. Okay, yin and yang is simply the Eastern concept of this same thing that I'm explaining right now. The Western version of that concept is as above, so below. I already have a video as above, so below. Check the end screen or the link in the description below if you want to see it. Point is that that polar opposites need each other. The one fulfills the other, and the one can't live without the other or exist with the other, because if the one didn't exist, then the other has no meaning, because the other has no opposite by which it can measure and or weigh itself. As hard as it may be to believe, evil is necessary in the world. Evil and malevolence in every way, shape, and form is necessary in the world, because that's the way that God has created the world. Only when God ceases it to exist and God simply wants to change it, will it change. But bottom line is that that's the way that the world that as we know it is created. That's why if you pay attention, everything has a polar opposite, more or less, everything. Okay, so yeah, even malevolence and pain and agony and suffering in general are also necessary to existence, whether you want to believe it or enjoy it or whatever you want to do with it or not. It's simply necessary. Without pain, you would know pleasure. Without 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 the concept of illness, you would not know good health. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. You wouldn't know strength without weakness, you name it. These are all polar opposites. And in the same way, the tree of death opposes the tree of life. It's known in Hebrew as the Sitra Ara. Sitra Ara means the other side, as far as I know. The Sitra Ara simply has spirits that are more, not necessarily infernal, but let's just say demonic counterparts, or spirits that are seen as unclean, non-celestial spirits in any case, that govern the opposing the opposing spheres of creation, as in the spheres that oppose everything that the tree of life pretty much stands for. Okay, in a layman's context, or in layman terms, the tree of death simply reflects the negative aspects of creation that are also necessary to existence. Just think about the opposite of enlightenment, the opposite of spirituality, and seeking it out. What would the opposite be? What would the opposite be in a normal context, in a mundane context? The opposite would be the actual. What would the opposite be of someone that doesn't care about spirituality whatsoever, etc., 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 or of someone that is completely spiritualistic? Exactly, someone that doesn't care about spirituality, someone that is so mired in the material and mired in nihilism that person doesn't even that person just outright rejects the very concept of spirituality. And yeah, that's what you can compare it to. When thinking about the tree of life, just think about the absence of life, more or less, if you will. That's what the tree of life is about, and that's also present in the world. The world isn't, a beautiful, happy-go-lucky place, etc., etc. You also have darkness, and that's my point. The tree of life, as shortly summarized as possible, is light, and the tree of death is darkness. Okay, think about Think about every negative thing you can think about, every negative aspect of creation. Okay, believe it or not, things that Gabura governs, things that Mars governs, that Samael governs, things like war and bloodshed and chaos, that's also, these things are also necessary. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about senseless violence, if you will. I'm talking about the void. Okay, a feeling of emptiness, hopelessness, a feeling of almost feeling like you don't exist, apathy. These are all things that the tree of life, generally speaking, governs. You think that Saturn governs these things, but no. Saturn governs Bina, generally speaking, governs necessary restrictions, okay? Destruction in a necessary way, shape, or form. You name it. In the sense that, for example, if you want to build a house, you need to break down an existing house. So it needs to be destroyed before you can create something new. That's normal. Okay, that's part of the light, if you will. But darkness is simply senseless destruction for no reason, no shape or form, you name it. And these are things that make people completely feel, let's just say these are things that outright that pretty much define horror outright. Things like apathy, like I said, the void, feelings of hopelessness and loneliness, just an absolute feeling that you're nothing, okay, and that the world is nothing. Just the whole bleak outlook, that is darkness, that's true horror. And that's what the tree of death represents. Despair, all of these negative emotions belong to the darkness, and that's what the tree of life, Kabbalistically speaking, represents. And the tree of life, the tree of death works pretty much the same way as the tree of life. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. With the addition, although I'm not completely sure of this, that it works backwards, as in instead of going to the opposite of Keter to the bottom, it's pretty much from the bottom in a chaotic mess going upwards. Since it's the opposite, so it generally speaking rejects spirituality and it glorifies the material over the immaterial, and it outright rejects the immaterial rather than make the false claim that it doesn't exist or that it's non-existent. Um, this is also, you can also compare this elementally to an inverted pentagram. A regular pentagram, the represents, it has 5 points, and the side points and the bottom points refer all to the four elements: earth, fire, air, water. And the top point, the point showing upwards, refers to the fifth element, which is spirit. And usually people that are goth, people that are into the whole dark lifestyle and whatnot, do usually, because they're deeply troubled people, as in psychologically, mentally, they're into the whole Hail Satan thing and all that nonsense. They often like to wear inverted pentagrams and stuff like that. And the inverted pentagram means the exact same thing. The inverted pentagram simply stands for the opposite. You know, it's the equivalent, the pentagramian equivalent of the tree of death, as in it rejects the, it rejects it rejects the immaterial, and it celebrates the material over the immaterial, as opposed to the regular pentagram, which puts, you know, spirit as the highest element from which all the others exist or come from. And an inverted pentagram, the point showing at the bottom simply refers to the material, and the whole twisted, of course, the twisted, almost seemingly illogical but still necessary, not illogical literally, but seemingly illogical notion that the material creates every other element in existence. So on an inverted pentagram, the point showing downwards refers to the material, as in the tangible materialness or materiality, whatever. And for the rest, everything stays the same. Okay, the four elements stay the same, but these are more the dark equivalents. So yeah, that's it. Okay, last but not least, I'm going to close off by saying that in reference to everything I said, the same way that an angel rules over everything, that angel also has a demonic or non-celestial, so an infernal or non-celestial counterpart that a non-celestial or demonic counterpart that simply opposes him or her or it, and it can also be a pagan god that is demonized more or less. But in any case, these entities, these dark entities, they pretty much govern the darkness that I was just referring to in the tree of death. They govern the antibodies or the Cliffot, that's what it's called, the anti-Sephiroth, the anti-spheres of creation, or basically the dark equivalents of the spheres of creation. They simply govern the darkness. That's all. Bye.